can you give me the IP address off that Xerox right over there?
Five 107.
5107.
Copy it up.
That's who I use. I've been.
Satisfied
Oh, yeah.
for many years?
Yeah, he. You don't have to worry about. He's gonna be the same every time.
Correct.
Just tell him what you want. And he's a lot cheaper actually than anybody else around.
How much you pay?
Had me on up $14. I tipped him pretty good though. After we hadn't had a haircut for 4 months, I gave him a pretty good tip.
Yeah, I did the same one.
No one complained.
My guy's $15.
Oh, I cut my hair. A tip or two.
I let my wife cut it when it was still closed down. She didn't do a bad job, but we're not gonna do it again. Yeah.
Well, my sister-in-law that's what she does for a living.
Mr. Roy's
I showed her the other day how to do it. Good.
All right, are we gonna have a transportation report today?
Ryan, would you be able to give some updates on transportation when the transportation report comes up? I know.
Yeah, so just give high level on kind of just working with this.
Great.
Yeah.
You got a new introduction?
Jeff's from our corporate office,
Good.
so he's our director of operations. We're trying to get him to join the team just to help have additional support. Not the local manager, but we're in process there.
Good deal.
Just, trying to make sure we can get the ground running in the right direction.
There you go.
So, pleased to meet you. If we're gonna have different people.
You too, sir.
Now, me and Mr. Benefield, well, no, you can't see there.
Well, I'm thinking, what if I grab the podium and put it between you two and then whoever's talking, just get something.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And we can,
On the social distance.
we got our masks on, so.
Yeah.
Hold on just a second, Richard. Let me grab this podium out of here. We're just gonna have whoever's talking. Let me read it. Here we go. Yeah, okay. All right. Come on in the middle. There you go. Let the young guys get it.
That's right.
Now, Mike, when I'm talking, can I just take that microphone down here, or do I need to get up here?
You can, but it should be, honestly, yes, we had,
This is Mr. Eloy.
Central and the Martha.
Can y'all hear me?
Add to.
They may have us on mute.
I see them.
Miss Kanika, can you hear me?
She said yes.
Loud and clear? Well, Miss Kanika says that we can always blame her if it doesn't go that way. See, she definitely heard you.
I'm gonna make sure I hear you.
All right, Miss Palmer. Did she get in?
Ms. Palmer.
Reverend Harris just sent her the link on the text.
Ms. Roy just asked when does the audio come on?
Is on.
Yeah. Hers is not. She doesn't have a microphone. She's gonna have to go down below and activate her mic.
It's her speakers.
It's like she doesn't have one installed.
Now, she's done it before. Well, someone else did it for her, let's say. She's gonna have to go down below and activate her mic. Let's ask her to go out and come back in with the audio.
No, that's the smaller one.
The mill's not letting him in. So the mill's not letting him in.
Got it. Is he clicking on the link through his NPSB email?
I don't know.
Probably not. They had to send him another one.
Okay. Mr. Roy's probably gonna try to get out and get back on. I just texted him. Give her a second to get back on. Mr. Roy. See if Mr. Emil's gonna make it.
He's trying to connect, but he's having some difficulties, maybe because of him connecting to his phone as opposed to laptop or something, or desktop.
Okay.
All right, Carolyn's not gonna make it.
No, she's back in.
Yeah, well, it's just a picture,
I don't see,
not a microphone.
Miss Willis is in the waiting room.
We'll give it 2 or 3 more minutes. Carolyn Roy, audio message. We're just probably gonna have to do something like this.
Here's Miss Pinky.
there's, Mr. Paul.
Okay, you're gonna be on speakerphone throughout the meeting.
All right, thank you.
Can't do that either.
Meeting adjourned.
Wonder what happened.
There's 2 Carolyn Lewis.
She's splitting. All right, we're gonna have to push on here pretty quick.
She must have drawn it up too then. Guessing she just had a grant permission for a microphone on there.
I don't know. She hung up on the connection, so I'm gonna let it go at that. I don't see Emil. Okay. Carolyn Roy, go ahead. We're working on it. She's got help now. All right. It's 5:03. It's time to start the regular meeting of the Niagara Parish School Board for July 14th. Mr. Garner, will you present the invocation? Reverend Harris, will you present the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, sir.
Please
Father,
stand.
we just come to you today. We ask you for your many blessings. We ask you to bless this meeting and the decisions that are made here today. We ask you to keep our students and parents and teachers all safe through this pandemic. We ask your blessings on many things, and we ask it all in your name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please sign electronic devices. Should any member would like to make a comment, please procure a form in the back and pass it up to the forward. Mr. Rosad has some comments for us for the particular agenda item. Ms. Revels, can you do a roll call for us?
Yes, sir. Mr. Danzy,
Here.
Mr. Garner,
Here.
Mr. Harris,
Present.
Mr. Matoir. Did he ever log on? Mrs. Guidros? Here. Mrs. Willis?
Here.
Mr. Benefield?
Here.
Mrs. Broadway?
Here.
Mrs. McGaskey? Ms. Palmer?
Here.
And Ms. Phelps.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. This time I'd like to turn the agenda over to the superintendent for his report.
So we met a week ago, and in that week, things have changed as they are wont to do during the coronavirus pandemic. So there's
I can't hear you. You can't hear that. No.
okay. I'm sorry.
It was. No.
Can you hear me now?
I know.
Can everyone hear me now? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. So a few things we would like to bring to your attention, board. First off, the LHSAA, which governs our sports, they have come out and said that sports will not take place in their full manner until phase 4. That does bring up, besides all the other issues we could think of that would go with that, I do want to put on y'all's plate the fact that there will be coaches who may not be participating in games, but once we're in phase 3, every sport, including football, will be allowed to practice, and they have been practicing. So I do believe the issue of compensation of stipends for coaches will become an issue. It is my suggestion that although they will not be competing in games necessarily, that they will still be performing the bulk of their duties, and therefore we should still continue to pay them their stipends. But I would like to just bring that to y'all's attention. Also, I'd like to bring to your attention the fact that our virtual school, our initial anticipation was we were going to probably have a few hundred students participate. We are now at 1,461 students. That does change our direction of how we will be presenting virtual. Initially, the idea was to go with Edgenuity because we thought it was going to be a few hundred students. When that number reaches 1,461, it becomes a little more cumbersome to do an Edgenuity program. Also, we like to be sensitive to the views of parents, and Edgenuity is very much an asynchronous program where there would be more of a facilitation than there would be direct instruction. So with that being said, the direction we now feel that it's necessary to go with those large numbers and with the comments from parents is that we need to have more of a Google Classroom-based platform, with the reasoning that that will allow us to not have the financial difficulties that 1,361 students represents on Edgenuity, but also it allows us to align the instruction going on virtually to align it more directly with what's going on in the schoolhouse. So when a student gets out of virtual, they will not have any hurdles to overcome getting back in the normal classroom. We are also trying to up our numbers on the teachers who would be teaching virtual so that the experience of every student would be more closely related to what's actually happening in the classroom, because we very much feel that if we do not have a robust, rigorous curriculum with a teacher right there to answer all the needs of all the students and parents, then people will choose a better option. And we very much feel that the Google Classroom platform, based on the numbers, based on what we can do, is probably the more viable option. And I'll get into another reason why that's shifted as well, but I wanted to make you aware of that. And just to give you some more context, those numbers for virtual school are increasing daily. This morning when I got into work, it was at 1,397, and about 2 hours ago it was at 1,461, and I guarantee you when I get off of the board meeting, we'll probably be close to 1,500. We anticipate getting as high as 2,000. To put that in perspective, that's over a third of our district. So again, the reason to pivot on that is because it is greatly changed from even a week ago, where we had, I think when I last spoke to you, we had around 600 students in virtual. Moving on from that, a very large item that I wanted everyone to digest. As I sat over the weekend, after talking to parents, after talking to teachers, after reading news articles, engaging in social media, engaging in conversations with district staff, I felt very much across the state and probably across the nation a significant shift in how parents and teachers feel about this next school year. There is a significant amount of anxiety, and I hate to even use the word anxiety because I don't want anyone to think that this isn't legitimate fear. We have a lot of teachers who have underlying conditions. We have a lot of parents who do not want to send their students to school. We have a lot of teachers who may not want to start back to school. All these fears are legitimate. With the numbers spiking to the degree they are spiking currently, we're seeing numbers that we haven't seen since March. In some cases, we're seeing numbers higher than we've ever seen. With that, also with the fact that we have a lot of items that we're purchasing to protect students and also engage in this virtual component of learning, whether it be iPads or protective cameras and things of that nature to register temperatures. All these things we've ordered. We ordered them as soon as we could. But everyone in the United States ordered these things too. And many of these things are on back order. And we will not get them till maybe late August or early September. Then I've also just talked to our teachers, and the fear of starting August 6th, it scares them. Then I talked to the principals. The principals have been working harder than I have ever seen professional educators work in my entire life. And I'm sure that's the same across the nation, across the state. They are doing everything they can to be prepared. But suffice it to say, we are running out of time. With all those factors involved, and with continuing guidance from LDOE, which, by the way, Bestie, I believe, is still meeting to give us our guidance for our final guidance for the year. So some of these things we can't even decide until they've decided. With all that being said, I feel the most prudent, the wisest decision, and the decision that it may not be popular with everyone, but I think it benefits our students and their safety. But I think the big group that we've forgotten in all this is our teachers. Our teachers are the ones who probably feel the risk more than anyone. And I want to address that. I want it to be them to know that we hear them. With all that being said, I am strongly advocating for us to push the start of school until September. I have included in your packet a sample calendar. That calendar would have us starting on August 31st. That first week would be similar to how we do pre-K, where you would go and kind of learn how to do school for a week, because school's going to look very different. And then on September 8th, we would start the real deal school, as I refer to it. I believe that there would be a collective sigh of relief if we were to do this. I've spoken to every principal. Every principal said, please make this happen. And one of our principals put it best. The state in Natchitoches Parish is calling this strong start. If we start on August 6th, we cannot guarantee it's going to be the strong start that we are promising. It'll be a strong start without iPads, or a strong start without proper COVID training. But if we go to a September start, that allows us to get our virtual school up and running. It allows us to get teachers trained to the level they need to be trained. And it allows us to make sure that we are actually having a strong start to school. What I would like to do is as I finish, is to leave this up for some discussion and some comments. But I'd really like to have a specially called meeting perhaps next week where we can discuss this and vote on this, because although I know some people may come to us and say, why are we waiting so late to make these changes? What I would say to them is COVID has changed in the past two weeks to be such a significant difference than our previous planning that I have to be flexible. Our response to COVID has to be flexible. Otherwise, we are going to be so rigid in our response that teachers and students are going to be put at risk. So I would like to deal with this in as quick a fashion as possible, but I know this is a big deal. I know it's a lot to digest, but this wasn't thought of overnight. To put in some more context, there are 3 other parishes that we know of that are doing the same thing. Caddo, Bossier, and Webster are doing it the same, and I believe once we make this move, if we make this move, rather, that many other parishes will probably follow. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. Okay. Yes, sir.
There's been some comments from the public on Strong Start. If I choose the virtual home learning option for my kids, will they be required to log in during certain hours of the day, or will they be required to complete so many hours in a given time span each day? So, something to think about.
I can respond to that right now. We originally thought Bessie was going to supply us with seat time requirements for virtual. Whether it's right or wrong, Bessie has decided to leave that up to individual school districts. We found that out today, I believe, from LDOE. So we will be coming up with what virtual norms and guidelines will be correct for Natchitoches Parish students participating in virtual school. Again, we anticipate that coming from LDOE because Bessie, because they typically give those guidelines, but that did not happen, so we will be coming up with those.
Doesn't make sense to me to read 9 bullet points, so go ahead.
Okay. The second question is, parents were asked to fill out a survey regarding different hybrid scenarios. Why haven't any of those been implemented? We are implementing the hybrid scenario at the high school. We not only looked at the hybrid scenarios that parents fill out, we also looked at your comments. I believe I read over 600 comments, and we looked at all that, and ultimately we did make a decision, and that wasn't going to satisfy everyone, but those were all looked at by multiple people and discussed at length. 3, in the past, so many parents have sent their children to school sick. If a child takes Motrin or Tylenol prior to coming to school, a fever will not appear during the fever checks upon arrival. How does a fever check prove the child isn't ill or asymptomatic? To your point, it is not a catch-all. It is one level, but teachers will also be doing other checks as to asking students if they've come into contact, asking students how they feel. But whoever submitted this comment, that is not 100%. But we cannot give COVID tests every day of the week. It's not financially viable and it's not logistically viable. So we're doing as much as we can in regards to that. Number 4, what measures are you taking to ensure kids, teachers, and staff do not come to school sick? We are encouraging everyone to not send their child to school sick. We are encouraging, I've sent emails to our staff to say that the line at which you typically would come to school prior to COVID, I've come to school or come to work with a fever before, low grade fever. I've come to school feeling not well. That is no longer acceptable, because it's not about being a good worker. It's about protecting those around you, especially those with underlying conditions. So we are encouraging. We also feel that with so many students participating in virtual, that that's our biggest fight against this, is having almost a third of the district who are participating in virtual. That will allow, and then once students are there, making sure that third grade and above is participating in wearing masks and social distancing as much as possible, which will be made easier by the fact that we will have less students in the buildings. Number 5, what measures are you taking to implement social distancing? We are having conversations, sending out emails daily to our staff, to our principals. We are only as strong in this endeavor as our weakest link. And what I mean by that is we are encouraging, we are doing spot checks, we are telling everyone to practice these things. Can I tell you that everyone is consistently doing it every moment of the day? I cannot. But we are trying to create a culture where, whether you're a teacher, a custodian, a para, a principal, when you see people not participating in those proper measures, that you are to call them out on that. And that's difficult as Southerners. We like to be polite and all that goes along with that. But we ourselves are calling each other out, calling ourselves out and holding each other accountable. But that's going to be a consistent, daily, hour by hour endeavor. And our response will probably dictate how quickly we move into phase 3 or phase 4. Question 6, how often will touch points be sanitized? We have redesignated the job priorities of custodians and teachers, and really all employees. Teachers will be in charge of their rooms, and that's not mopping and sweeping. That's every hour and every movement. If students go to the bathroom and come back, we are cleaning those high frequency touched areas. For janitors, typically you see a janitor doing a lot of things like maybe polishing the floor. We're probably not going to do a whole lot of polishing of floors, because those janitors, now their priority is every hour on the hour cleaning those high frequency touched areas. So we are doing PD with them. We're providing them guidance. And we're also relying heavily on our administrative teams, our principals and our assistant principals, to enforce these guidelines. Are you offering free testing? We are not. The Sheriff's Department is offering free testing. And so far, I don't believe at any point they've become overwhelmed with that. And we've had success referring our folks to the Sheriff's Department in their mobile testing. How will you ensure asymptomatic people do not spread the virus? The only way to do this, every doctor I've spoken to, and I know there's a lot of anxiety out there, and a lot of parents and community members are reading a lot of stuff on social media. They're reading stuff even on mainstream media, and a lot of stuff is contradicting itself. As I told one of the board members earlier today, the consistent message from every medical professional that I have spoken to, not gotten a blurb on CNN or Fox News or social media, but actually spoken to, they've told me a few things that I'd like to share with you. Number 1, if you wear a mask and the person you interact with is wearing a mask, you are at an extremely low risk of contracting the virus. Number 2, if you compound that with social distancing, you're at an even better advantage. Number 3, if you wash your hands consistently throughout the day, which I probably today have washed my hands at least 10 times, for 20 seconds. And they tell us it doesn't matter the hot or cold water, it matters that you see bubbles. And I know that sounds silly, but if you see bubbles when you're washing your hands, that means you're killing the virus. If you do those things, you can be safe. I want to tell everyone as well, and please don't judge me, but I am sending my children to schools in this parish. And I'm doing that not as a statement of, oh, look at me, look how, I believe in this. I'm doing it because I believe in the teachers, in the principals of this district, and I also believe in educating my own children as to what their responsibility is. Now, one of my children is 4 years old. In that case, I'm going to heavily rely on the teacher. But I do believe if we follow these guidelines strictly, if we adhere to the guidance we are being given, everyone can be safe. I have met, in my time since April 20th being here, I've met thousands of people. When I've met them, I have not shook their hands. I've washed my hands if we come into contact in any way, and I wear a mask and I social distance. Because of that, I believe that's why I have not contracted the virus yet. Now, even with the best plans, can things happen? Yes, they can. But I have yet to hear of many cases where people did everything they were supposed to and contracted the virus. I'm sure there's examples, but most of what I've seen are people who at some point along the way did not follow the proper guidance, and it may have been accidental, because we don't want to shame people who've gotten the virus or anything like that. But I really feel strongly that the principals and the leadership of these schools understand what's being asked of them. Number 9, are you guys requiring all kids, all teachers, and all staff to wear masks while on campus? The answer to that is we have not voted that in, but it is my strong recommendation as part of Strong Start that every third grader and above, and that includes all adults on campus and includes our bus drivers, will wear their mask while they're on campus. To give caveats to that, besides the medical reasons that the governor has already spoken about and LDOE's spoken about, to say, oh, you don't have to wear your mask when you're, I don't know, in the hallway or the bathroom or playing softball or whatever it is, that diminishes the entire program of what we're trying to do. Is it going to be fun? No. But what I would say to everyone out there, when you talk about how unfun it is to wear a mask, you need to think about the alternative. The alternative is being at home. The alternative is moving back into phase 1. The alternative is not having football and all these things we want. Our response to this, even at a level of Natchitoches Parish, is going to dictate the direction of this entire school year. So we will be requiring that. And as far as under 3rd grade, parents who want their child to wear a mask, we will enforce that for that child. So yeah, the answer to that question is a resounding yes.
And the second part of that is also maintenance and turning those and washing those things.
So we are going to be encouraging those things at all times. Teachers are great about telling students at on a Tuesday or a Thursday, hey, you need to wash that mask. And I think, some of these things, we're only as good as how much partnership there is with the parents and communities but I think if we bombard everyone with this information on a daily basis, it's amazing how you can get people to do things because you just keep telling them over and over again, and you tell them in ways that are persuasive. You tell them in ways that pull at heartstrings. I wear my mask not necessarily because I'm concerned about myself. I wear it for the people in my office who have family members or they themselves have underlying conditions, and that's what, whenever I'm thinking, oh, I hate wearing this mask, I think about those people. And I think we can encourage people as much as possible. But at a certain point, that's all we can do.
I want to thank members of the public for submitting their comments. That's actually the way we're supposed to do, especially in this virtual world. It gives us the opportunity to hear from the public for those who can't attend the meeting. Superintendent Eloy, you have a few more things things on your report, and I'm not sure the recognitions will
The
take place.
recognitions, due to our unusual meeting today, have been postponed until the next traditional board meeting, so that those folks can be recognized in the traditional way.
Do we have any old business? Any board members about old business? Any new this mask? Any new business board members? Okay, I'd like for us to pay attention to the consent agenda. There's been no additions since Tuesday last week. Do I hear a motion?
Second.
Offered by Mrs. Guidroz, second by Mr. Danzy. We'll need a roll call vote on this, Ms. Revels.
Mr. Danzy,
Yes.
Mr. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Did Mr. McGuire log on?
Yeah, I'm on.
Okay. Mr.
Yeah.
McGuire? Yes.
Yeah.
Mrs. Guidroz? Mrs. Guidroz? Okay. Mrs. Willis?
Yes.
Mr. Benefield?
Yes.
Mrs. Broadway?
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey?
Well, she's there.
Mrs. McGaskey, you'll have to unmute your mic.
Jose, can you unmute her mic? I think she's Galaxy. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Okay, let's go. Circle back, Ms. Revels.
Okay. Ms. Palmer?
Yes.
And Ms. Phelps?
Yes. Yes.
Sure.
Hey, board members, if you could please unmute yourself when you need to say something, and then put yourself back on mute. Otherwise, we're going to create a big feedback, and it's going to distort the audio for everybody. So make sure if you're not actively speaking, you are on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Cozan. Okay, motion passes. Finance Committee, Mr. Danzy.
Okay, item number 1A, appropriate action on bids. These were talked about in the Tuesday meeting last week. 1A, Cisco Foods was a low bidder. 1B was a line item. 1C, paper cleaning. B was milk products. C was paper cleaning and supplies. It was a line item. D was non-hazardous waste disposal, and that was Terry Goins, a low bidder. E was pest control service, Ralston. And F was Natchez Central High School additions and alterations. The bids were just opened. And Descott was a low bidder. And I move that we accept all those low bids on those items.
Here's a low bid for Marthaville.
Oh, the Marthaville also was on there, and the low bid for Marthaville was Pat Williams Construction.
Okay,
Mr. Danzy,
Yes.
can you give us the amounts? For the Marthaville parking lot, I don't believe that we were provided that document.
Yes, I can. The Marthaville was $402,669.70.
And they felt confident being able to get that completed prior to the start of the school year?
That's what I understand.
But suppose she said that's what he understands on that item.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, the total for MD Descott and Natchitoches Central that's a total amount, right? $7,278,000.
Yeah, that's the base bid and both alternates.
Base bid and both alternates. And I move we accept these bids. Item number 1.
I have a question.
Got a question from Ms. Phelps.
Yeah, so the bids on the processed and frozen foods, will those need to be adjusted since we have 1,400 kids staying at home?
The price probably wouldn't have to be adjusted. I'm sure the quantities will be.
Okay.
We have spoken with food service, and we're keeping them abreast every day of the changing number of virtual students. But the thing about that is, those virtual students will still be allowed to pick up meals if they so choose.
Okay, that's great.
We have a motion on the floor for line item 1, Finance Committee, and also line item 11, the Finance Committee for Marthaville parking lot. We have a motion by Mr. Danzy, a second by Ms. Guidros. Ms. Rebels, will we get a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Danzy?
Yes.
Mr. Garner? Mr. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Matuire?
Yes.
Mrs. Guidros?
Yes.
Mrs. Willis? Yes. Mr. Benefield?
Yes.
Mrs. Broadway?
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey? Ms. Palmer?
Yes. Yes.
Phelps?
Yes.
Try Mrs. McCaskey again.
Mrs. McGaskey, would you unmute your mic, please?
Okay, let's vote.
Motion passed.
Thank you.
Item number 2, received transportation report. We have Mr. Ryan Johnson here. Oh, Mr. Johnson? Yes.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. And hello, members of the board and superintendent.
That's Ms. McGaskey.
Oh, what'd you say?
Try it again, Ms. McGaskey. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Yep, just wanted to provide transportation updates. Ryan Johnson with Echo Ride, Vice President of our region. Also have Jeff Pullen here, Director of Operations from our Wisconsin office. As we've been down here the past couple weeks, working closely with Natchitoches Parish on some of the back to school preparation and COVID procedures for the buses, working on communications with the drivers, as well as one of the main items that we were working on was with some of the principals and continuing training to get more CDL drivers for their coaches. Some of those are obviously lower priorities now, but from a coach standpoint, but we're here trying to make sure that we can be off to the right start when school resumes.
So all of the air conditioners are recharged on those buses?
Yes.
They're working good.
Yep. So.
Ms. Phelps getting back in. Okay, any questions for Mr. Johnson or Mr. Pullen? How close are you getting close to seating a leader for your bus terminal?
Yep. So we've continued the recruitment process for the terminal manager position, and recently been in conversations in the final stages, and we'll hopefully have a decision in the coming days, and we'll inform the school as soon as that is made, and the administrators, so that we can make sure that they're integrated, and we're off to a good start for the start of the school year.
That's great. That's a hard position to fill.
Yes, and we have a great team with the staff, with the maintenance department, with our drivers, our monitors. We're really excited for the start of the school year because we felt we have an incredible team and want to make sure that we can get the kids to and from school safely. So, thank
Mr.
you.
Pullen, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the Louisiana heat while you can.
I'm trying.
So,
Thank you.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Item number 3, we received the tax commission report from Mr. Foshee, in committee meeting. Item number 4, we received the budget update from Mr. Foshee. I'll move that we accept the budget update.
Question before we get going. Well, we have to have it on. I'm sorry. You've got a motion on the floor. Do we hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Mr. Garner. Discussion. Mr. Foshee, we had a gap on salaries. Were you able to ascertain why there was a gap based on the salaries for that budget update?
Just basically, we spent more than we had as far as on salaries.
Okay. I mean, was there something that we did a little differently, incurred additional costs? What was that drove us over the budget?
I'm not sure on that.
Okay. Can you find that out for us?
Yeah.
Okay, good deal. It'd be great to know, because we don't want to repeat history.
That would, thank you, that would be great to know.
Yes, sir, because we don't want to repeat that history. If we have an area we need to concentrate on, let's concentrate on it. We have a motion by Mr. Danzy and a second by Mr. Garner. Roll call vote, Mrs. Rebels.
Yes.
She hasn't unmuted.
Yeah.
Okay, there it is. Sorry. Mr. Danzy,
Yes.
Mr. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
No.
Mr. Matoir,
No.
Mrs. Guidros,
Yes.
Mrs. Willis,
No.
Mr. Benefield,
Yes.
Mrs. Broadway,
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey, Miss Palmer,
Yes.
Miss Phelps,
No.
Miss McGaskey, six yes, 4 no. Motion passed.
Item number 5, received the maintenance report. We received it from Mr. Jocelyn. We appreciate him providing that for us. Item number 6, consider approving a resolution to terminate the 99-year lease between Natchez Parish School Board and Northwestern State University, and I move that we honor that.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Danzy, a second by Reverend Harris to terminate the 99-year lease between the Natchez Parish School Board and Northwestern State University. Ms. Rebels, can you call, and that's for the former site of the Northwestern Junior High. Can we have a roll call vote on that, please, ma'am?
Mr. Danzy,
Yes.
Mr. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Matoir,
No.
Mrs. Guidros,
Yes.
Mrs. Willis,
Yes.
Mr. Benefield,
Yes.
Mrs. Broadway,
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey, Miss Palmer,
Yes.
Miss Phelps, Mrs. McGaskey. Motion passed.
Thank you.
Item number 7, consider approving the necessary steps to roll forward the millage rates on property taxes.
I move that we approve the necessary steps to roll forward the millage rates on the taxes.
I'll second it.
Okay, we've got a motion by Mrs. Gidros, second by Mr. Garner to roll forward the millage rates on property taxes in Natchez Parish. Any discussion in this area? Roll call vote, Mrs. Rebels, please.
Mr. Danzy,
Yes.
Mr. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
I'm sorry, say again.
Yes.
Mr. Matuire,
No.
Mrs. Gidros,
Yes.
Mrs. Willis,
Yes.
Mr. Benefield,
Yes.
Mrs. Broadway,
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey, Miss Palmer,
No.
Miss Phelps,
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey. Motion passed.
Thank you, ma'am.
Item number 8, consider approving a grant agreement with the Rapides Foundation for the renewal of Healthy Behavior School District Partnership Grant for the 2021 school year, not to exceed $39,450 over 12 months beginning July 1st, 2020, with the permission for the superintendent to sign all necessary paperwork. And I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
We have an offer by Mr. Danzy and a second by Mrs. Gidros. Any discussion on this area? Roll call vote, Mrs. Rebels.
Mr. Danzy,
Yes.
Mr. Garner,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Matuire,
Yes.
Mrs. Gidros,
Yes.
Mrs. Willis,
Yes.
Mr. Benefield,
Yes.
Mrs. Broadway,
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey, Miss Palmer,
Yes.
Miss Phelps,
Yes.
Miss McGaskey. Motion passed.
Thank you, ma'am.
Item number 9, consider approving a grant agreement with the Rapides Foundation for the renewal of the Youth Volunteer School District Grant for the 2021 school year, not to exceed $6,700 over 12 months beginning July 1st, 2020, with permission for the superintendent to sign all necessary paperwork. And I move we accept that.
We have an offer by Mr. Garner for this item.
I second.
Second by Mr. Matuire. Any discussion?
What is this again? I'm sorry.
It's a $6,700 grant with the Rapides Foundation over 12 months.
Miss Ingram can speak. Miss Ingram spoke about it at the committee meeting, but she can update you as to what that is.
I remember.
Okay.
Roll call, Ms. Rebels. You have a motion and a second on the floor.
Yes, sir. Mr. Danzy,
Yes.
Mr. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Harris, Mr. Matuire,
Yes.
Mrs. Gidros,
Yes.
Mrs. Willis,
Yes.
Mr. Benefield,
Yes.
Mrs. Broadway,
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey, Miss Palmer,
Yes.
Miss Phelps,
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey. Motion passed.
Thank you, ma'am.
Item number 10, receive update on parking lot at LP Vaughn School. Mr. Benfield?
Yes, sir. Mr. Poshie, we had some discussion a week ago Tuesday about gravel versus paving, and we are leaning hardly toward the gravel. And do you have any additional information on what it would cost to gravel that part of the parking lot because of that ditch?
Yeah, we talked to the
person that was gonna do it, and we changed over from using the gravel to that other road-based type.
That 610?
Yeah.
Yes.
And he said it costs about 50% more to do that,
Mhm.
and everything is better material. So I gave him the go ahead and let's do it with that.
Okay, do you have a cost?
It's gonna probably run over 10, since it's gonna be, that costs more.
$10,000?
Yeah, so it's probably gonna be, and I'm thinking in the neighborhood of 15 or so.
However, that's necessary. We had a lot of trouble with it last fall and winter. We had a lot of people we can't put all of the people that work at LP Bond there without doing this. It's a necessary evil. Do we hear a motion to gravel this part of the parking lot?
I'll offer.
Have an offer by Mr. McGuire,
I'll second it.
second by Mr. Garner. Any discussion in this area by using the better product?
I have some questions.
Ma'am?
I have some questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain a little bit more what kind of material this is? And the reason why, we want to make sure the employees are safe walking across the gravel without potholes that build up over time. And is this just a temporary solution to a bigger problem that we have? I mean, will it make a difference? And how many parking places will it actually accommodate?
Mr. Foshee, do you have some information on that?
On the number of parking places, I'm not really sure. It would, how many they have in that area.
Ms. Felt, the material, it's actually going to be, once they pack it down, it'll be almost like cement, because it's a small pebble and it binds together, with that. So ladies should be able to walk on it with their high heel shoes and shouldn't have a problem with it or whatever, because it really makes, and I was trying to think about a place that you probably would have knew what they have it on there, but it makes, because we have used it a good bit around here on driveways, and people put it on their driveway at their house and where they park their cars. So if it binds like it's supposed to, it'll be a good material.
It's that gray rock you see on a lot of people's drives. And it's not limestone.
Right. I guess I was a little concerned. Rocky surface, ladies walking on it, that kind of thing.
And a lot of times people think with that rock, like the old brown rock or the old wind rock, big stuff. But this is it's small stuff, and it really packs good.
Okay.
Okay, we have any other discussion? Excuse me. We have an offer by Mr. McGuire, and I think a second by Mr. Garner. Was that it?
Yeah, it was good.
And any other discussion? Roll call vote, Mrs. Rose.
Okay, and Mr. Benfield, if you please, would please tell me again, because what we're using, what the actual vote is to accept what, because it's only listed as an update on the agenda. So I want to make sure I get the motion right.
Okay. We are putting down substrate on the LP Vaughn parking lot that is used, overflow parking lot that is used now. We're using 610 rock.
And roughly 20 people park there.
Okay. And thank you, Superintendent Leroy. And we're using 610 rock to increase the parking area of our LP park.
Okay.
For a cost of roughly $15,000.
15,000. Okay. Mr. Danzy,
Yes.
Mr. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Matoir,
Yes.
Mrs. Guidros,
Yes.
Mrs. Willis,
Yes.
Mr. Benefield,
Yes.
Mrs. Broadway,
Yes.
Ms. McGaskey, Ms. Palmer,
Yes.
Ms. Phelps.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Ms. McGaskey, are you voting on finance item number 10? LP Bond parking lot?
it would be good to have her input because this was one of the items that she was very concerned about.
Ms. McGaskey, do you have a vote for the LP Vaughn Park?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Motion passed.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. President, that concludes finance.
I'm sorry, one last thing. Will you please clarify for me who made the motion and the second?
Mr. McGuire made the motion. Mr. Garner seconded the motion.
Thank you.
The personnel report, Mrs. Page. Thank you, Mr. Danson.
Well,
Steve, have any questions? Is that you? That's it.
Mrs. Page had asked if does any board member have any questions about the update?
I have a question about the director of academics position. So since Mr. LeGrand took that picture, position, is that gonna cost the board for another salary? Because we have to find a position for the principal?
No, ma'am. If you recall, the way we were able to do that was with LP Vaughn going to one principal, and then also with Miss Pinkney moving to director of operations, but us not replacing in the curriculum department.
Okay.
Do I hear a motion to approve the personnel report?
I'll offer.
Reverend
I'll
Harris
say-
offered, and was that Ms. Phelps?
Yes.
Okay. Second by Mrs. Phelps. Roll call vote. Well, any discussion? Roll call vote, Ms. Revels.
Mr. Danzy,
yes.
Mr. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. McGuire,
Yes.
Mrs. Guidros,
Yes.
Mrs. Willis,
Yes.
Mr. Benefield,
Yes.
Mrs. Broadway,
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey,
Yes.
Ms. Palmer,
Yes.
and Ms. Phelps.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Page. Reverend Harris, executive report.
Mr. President, can I defer to you to do that for me, please?
Sure, not a problem. Item 1, receive and discuss a complete report from Department of Exceptional Student Services advising on how services were maintained during the COVID-19, including how many children were serviced and whether the service had been completely restored to include summer services. Mrs. Phelps has sponsored this item. Mrs. Bennett provided us with a detailed booklet and report last Tuesday. Anything to add to that, Mrs. Phelps?
Well, I just wanted to state that I was very pleased and very impressed with the report. It was very long. I'm still reading it, so it's taken a few days to take it all in, but I so appreciate her time and transparency and letting the whole district know exactly what all has transpired during this time and how much work has been done. So I do appreciate the effort and the information and transparency.
Good deal. Mrs. Phelps, would you entertain offering a motion to?
Willis,
Yes.
Mr. Benefield,
Yes.
Mrs. Broadway,
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey,
Yes.
Ms. Palmer,
Yes.
and Ms. Phelps.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Item 2, consider board training on the roles and responsibility of a school board member and superintendent. We've had this on the books for quite some time. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has stifled that. It has again. We had it training set for Friday. However, when we had interruptions because of exposure, we decided in the best interest to postpone it. I still would like for us to vote on this item, and we may end up having to do this virtually. So I would like to offer a motion to consider this roles and responsibility training of the board member and superintendent for a later date.
A second.
We have a second from Mrs. Phelps. Mrs. Revels, is there any discussion in this area? This training is 3.5 hours, and I think it'll be beneficial for all of us. Mrs. Revels, can we have a roll call vote, please?
I have a question. Do we get hours, credit hours for those?
We do. We get 1.5 to 2. I don't think we get the full 3.5. There's something there that I'm not quite sure, but we do get CEUs.
Okay.
Do know that we should take advantage of the. I don't know if that one that's coming up, the training that's coming up, is it free or not, Ms. Revel?
I do not know off the top of my head, but I will try to find out before the end of this meeting.
I think it's $175.
It is.
That's what I want to say, but don't quote me.
It's not free. It's not like, it's just like the other one. It's a charge.
Yeah, I
Well,
think it's $175.
The other one was good. It was great. I don't know why they haven't another one, but anyway, it was great.
Are we ready for roll call?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Danzy?
Yes.
Mr. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Matoir?
Yes.
Mrs. Guidros?
Yes.
Mrs. Willis?
Yes.
Mr. Benefield?
Yes.
Mrs. Broadway?
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey? Ms. Palmer?
Yes.
Ms. Phelps?
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey? Ms. McGaskey, if you'd like to vote, I need you to unmute your mic, please. Motion passed.
Thank you, Ms. Revels. Item 3, discuss revised cell phone policy. Superintendent Eloy will take the floor in just a second.
Can you hear me?
Do we need to record a vote, or is it too late, Mr. Benefield?
You can record it. That's fine. It will probably be
Ms. McGaskey?
yes, probably.
Ms. McGaskey, how would you like to vote on executive report item number 2?
Okay, there's something going on in the background. Okay, there it is.
Ms. McGaskey, can you hear me?
She's struggling with her connection.
Okay.
It's going in and out. Okay, let's move forward.
Okay.
Superintendent Eloy, do you have any more comments on your cell phone policy before we?
Just this is still still making sure that there's order and there's rules, but trying to not get into power struggles with something that we know is here. This is about philosophically saying we need to not ban cell phones. We need to teach our students how to use them responsibly, and also not making administrators in a situation where they have to suspend a student over a cell phone.
Okay, do we hear a motion to entertain this revised cell phone policy?
I'll offer.
Offered by Reverend Harris.
A second.
Second by Mrs. Phelps. Further discussion, board members? I think it's a good approach. We can always change the policy if it's not effective. I think it's a way for us to keep students in the classroom, but still have a consequence. Any other discussion? Mrs. Revels, can we have a roll call?
Mr. Danzy?
Yes.
Mr. Garner,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Matoir,
Yes.
Mrs. Guidros,
Yes.
Mrs. Willis,
Yes.
Mr. Benefield,
Yes.
Mr. Broadway. I'm sorry, Mrs. Broadway,
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey, Miss Palmer,
Yes.
Miss Phelps,
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey. Motion passed.
Thank you. Item 4, discuss Strong Start NACA. Superintendent Eloy presented a lengthy report and options that we will have for the fall start, and he also included some of those during his superintendent remarks. Can you elaborate some more?
Yes. So, board, when we spoke about Strong Start, and if you read through the document, there was a key word that was on all those pages, and that word was draft. Today, as we have been sitting in this meeting, Bessie has been finalizing their minimum requirements for protecting students. So I would ask that we not vote on Strong Start tonight, because what we need to do is go back to that plan and update based on what Bessie comes out with today. And then with us also considering a shift with the Google Classroom platform, as I spoke about earlier, because of the increased numbers in our virtual school. Like I said, close to 1,500 students, as opposed to last week, it was only 700 students. And then also with the possibility that I would be bringing before the board a consideration to start school later, we need to amend that plan before we vote on it. And item 5, again, that would go along with what Bessie. We have our procedures and precautions, but based on House Bill 59 and Bessie's guidance that we will be getting tonight or tomorrow morning, we cannot finalize those plans without making sure we're in line with what they're putting out to us.
Okay. Item 6, discuss suspending or modifying. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask about item number 4. I had a quick question. Since we are delaying voting on Strong Start, and we're also, even potentially looking at extending our start date or pushing back our start date, will we be changing the final date to sign up for the digital learning? I know that we're asking for grace as a district on making some final decisions, and I think that parents would appreciate that as well.
To answer that question, the only answer I could give is only if we extended the start time. And let me be clear about this. This is not to be rigid, but there are so many logistical considerations, whether it be, as Ms. Phelps mentioned earlier, the lunchrooms and feeding, or as the gentleman from Echo, they need to have their stuff. And then also staffing. Typically, we complete staffing by May. Because of COVID this year and because of the virtual school, we are still in limbo with how are we addressing staffing. So I would be open to extending only if we were pushing back the start of the year, because that would give us time. If we don't push back the start of the year, I do think at some point we have to have a date, which as it stands now is that Friday. But I also think that would be great as well, because as you all know, we will not hear from the governor about the next phase until I believe July 23rd, or July 22nd, one of those days. And that would allow parents to make more informed decisions, but also give us the flexibility as far as our logistical considerations.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a good question, Ms. Broadway. Item 6, discuss suspending or modifying school uniforms for all or part of the 2021 school year, offered by Ms. Broadway, Phelps, and Palmer. We started discussion Tuesday of last week and decided we were going to carry it into tonight. I do have a comment from the public that I do need to read before we enter in any of our discussion. If uniforms will be suspended for the 2021 school year, it would be more beneficial for parents, guardians to suspend them for the entire year. During a normal school year, uniforms are purchased prior to the start of school when companies are offering discounted special prices. While uniforms can be purchased year-round, they're usually offered at the regular price or a price not comparable to the prices offered at the start of school. Yes, parents can purchase uniforms while they're being offered at lower prices, but they run the risk of the items not fitting. And so this item was submitted.
Mr. Benefield, do you mind, y'all also asked me at the last meeting if I could broach this to the principals and get their input.
Absolutely.
So we spoke last Tuesday. Wednesday morning, I spoke to all the principals, and they were in agreement that I think one principal put it best. We have to put ourselves in the shoes of families that may live differently or have different obstacles. So they all recognize that they do believe there's an issue as far as whether we want to call it equity or empathy or grace. But they all said that they would feel confident in their ability to address this at a school level. So if they, whether it was 10 families or 100 families who had issues, that they would be able to address that. And I asked them, I said, you don't believe any family would slip through the cracks? And they were very confident in their response that that would not be the case. And then also adding to that, Ms. Dubois and with the McKinney-Vento students would be able to purchase items as well. Going back to, and Ms. Wright as well, correct. The other part I would add to this, some of what we talked about was about logistical issues as far as getting things in on time. If we were to pursue a later school start date, I believe some of the issues, not financial, but the issues with getting Amazon to get our stuff on time and things of that nature might be addressed. But I did want to offer that the principals all believe that they can deal with this at their schools and make sure all students are outfitted properly.
All right, thank you for that. I did want to share that I received quite a bit of feedback from both parents and some teachers/administrators. Overall, when I looked at the information, we had 62.86% of our parents and teachers who were for uniforms. We had 62.86% who were for modifying or doing away with the uniforms or providing a waiver period or extending a waiver period. We had 34.29% that were wanting to continue with the uniforms as is. And then I had 2.86% who said, it really doesn't matter to me. I just need to know what to buy. So I think it is interesting to hear that, we did, like I said, there was a lot of response, but we do have people who are very interested in looking at this modification or this extension. And it wasn't just parents. It was actually teachers and administrators as well. I had some in both categories. So that is some information I think it is important for us to consider.
To piggyback off of that, Beverly, I think it's also important to note that I believe most of the board is in agreement with the fact that we do represent parents, many parents, grandparents, lots of people who are raising children, all different economic backgrounds, and we're simply bringing their concerns to the whole board. And
right.
Whatever our situation is, whatever we agree on, I just want the public in the district to realize their concerns are being heard. We're discussing them, and they are not going unnoticed, whatever the resolution is or however it turns out.
Ms. Broadway.
Very well stated. Thank you.
Ms. Broadway, you conducted a survey, or what was it?
Not a survey. I just looked at what feedback I received.
Okay. How many people replied?
I I have a total of 70. Now that was people who directly got in touch with me, and then there were a few who actually contacted Ms. Phelps, and she forwarded that information to me.
Okay, so it was a collaboration.
Well, unofficially, I was doing it, and then she said that she had some, comments as well, and just kind of passed them along.
Okay.
And collaborating is what we should be doing at this point by listening to everyone who does contact us.
And I really want to say that I was so excited that we had this many people reaching out to us. That it is, it's a good thing that people feel comfortable reaching out and expressing their desires and concerns.
Ms. Broadway, question: when you spoke to anyone, was there any suggestion of what modification would look like? Did anyone?
Some of the modifications, there were comments such as, if you want to wear uniforms, wear uniforms. If not, people suggested blue jeans and maybe a school spirit shirt, or some even said just a shirt that's, a plain t-shirt in the color of the school colors. Some were just not even that specific. It was just kind of like, just wear what you have. I do believe, and Ms. Phelps, please correct me if you're wrong, someone mentioned just extending the kind of having a waiver for having to have your uniforms until a semester into school, which was an interesting idea, especially considering that we have people who are dabbling with the idea of this digital. And it gives them the opportunity to decide, do I want to invest in school uniforms? Is the digital working for me and I want to continue that? I don't want to unnecessarily spend my funds on school uniforms.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
In reference to that, couldn't we look at as you said, for as modification? I think Beverly mentioned about just plain color, school color t-shirts or spirit, and jeans or jean shorts at least to the knee or below. And we set guidelines, no, too tight jeans, same fit as if you were wearing a uniform, and no holy ones, because anytime we make changes, we always include guidelines. I think that would help to eliminate any problems. I have to apologize. I've been having issues with my phone and my tablet going from one to the other, but hopefully y'all can hear me for the rest of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McGaskey. But I do have a question. We're talking about putting guidelines to morph a program that's been successful to get away from the guidelines that we that we've already established in Natchez Parish. I just don't understand why we need to do that.
Why we need to do?
I mean, we're establishing guidelines for an alternate type situation where we already have guidelines that are effective. And it's just a question from my perspective.
I think purchase uniforms.
Maybe we're talking more about modification, but one of the things that we talked about modifying that would probably suffice all of this is to extend the time in which they would get uniforms. During that time, the principals could note and see those ones who are needing uniforms, and through our federal programs and our parent organization and things like that, we could get the uniforms that are necessary for the people.
Yeah. So this is Mr. Ela. I don't know how many of y'all can actually see me, but my thoughts on it are that I do think a modification is necessary because we're in times that are calling for that. And my suggestion on a modification would be an extended. We already have a 2-week grace period. Extending that to whether it be 3 weeks or 4 weeks. But I would say this about when we talk about modifying the actual dress code, what we're doing is we're creating a new dress code, so to speak. We're not changing anything, except a lot of these are things that create issues in the hallways. They create issues with schools, whether they should or shouldn't. They create those things. And so I am all for giving that extra grace, allowing the principals to do what we've asked them to do. But then perhaps for next year, coming back, hopefully we'll be in more solid times and saying, can we add spirit shirts to the mix and things of that nature? Because I just think once we start adding blue jeans or things of that nature, what we're really doing is we're expanding our dress code. We're keeping a dress code, we're just expanding it. So I would be very much in favor, not that I get a vote in it, in giving more grace, but I think at this juncture that would be a lot of change in an already very unsettled time. And I also I want to listen to parents, and I also want to listen to principals, but I think a lot of times what we can do is we can take what parents say and we can take what principals say, because those are two different perspectives, and we can kind of meet in the middle. And I think some of that grace of extending that period might be that meeting in the middle. But I leave a lot of that discussion to the board.
My fear is we have a national election that's coming up this fall, and someone shows up in a political shirt, which is why the uniforms were put into place to start with. And then you suddenly end up with an issue at school. Now the principal has to deal with it, and uniforms take that type of thing out of the principal's hands. That's already established. I just don't want us to create something that's going to create issues for our principals. I want us to think about that, because, what's perfectly fine for one family to wear one type shirt is not necessarily particularly fine for another type family, and there may be a collision. And so,
you can set guidelines for regular clothes. If you decided to do regular shirts, you can set guidelines, just like you set guidelines for the uniforms. You say belt, you say certain color pants, certain color shirts. If you set the guidelines for the modifications, they still have to go by the guidelines. I mean, it can be guidelines for everything. So if you say no election shirts, well, they should come to school with election shirts. But you can say belt, and they come to school with no belt. So what's the difference?
I thought we were talking about spirit shirts or possibly plain T-shirts that are the school colors. That was just a suggestion, but I didn't think we were talking about politically motivated shirts. If the modification occurs and we vote to modify that, it would be, as I said, it would be spirit shirts or T-shirts the color of the same as school colors.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, don't we have guidelines for dress down days?
Yeah, well, you can't wear no political shirt, no way.
Anyway,
exactly.
That's a no-no in the first place.
But I think there are guidelines for dress down days, which I would imagine would cover the grace period that we're discussing.
Yeah, well, I think we might all look at that so that we won't go into...
Ms. Guidros has some... Oh, I'm sorry, Reverend Harris. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we may all to make sure we don't go in tampering with things that we may, cause a domino effect.
Ms. Guidro had a question. I don't know if y'all can hear her. 1 second.
It was my understanding when you met with the principals that they felt that they could help any family that needed that. And during that grace period, if we need some modification on uniforms, could that not be left up to the principals to say, yes, you can wear this until we can get uniforms?
Yes, ma'am. And they were adamant that they would be able to do all that, and that in the grace period, the grace period would be even better because it allows them the ability to take care of it. But I mean, there was not one principal, not one school that said that they would not be able to address all the needs. And I told them, I said, you realize I'm going to the board and I'm saying that you are saying this, that you can take care of all needs. And they said, yes, we totally understand that responsibility. We feel like we can shoulder it with no problem.
So are they saying that they are going to be able to address this issue with an additional grace period or without it?
The discussion was that they probably wouldn't need one, but they weren't against a grace period. They felt like they could still do it in that 2 week, but they understood that this year there might be a greater need than others. So they were not against a grace period whatsoever, but they felt whether it be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or otherwise, that they could address the issues. They said many of them have the infrastructure already in place because they purchase these extra sets of clothing throughout the year, and some of it's just sitting on racks waiting to be taken. And then others said, what they don't have, they can either get through organizations in the community that they already have relationships with, or they would be able to order and get it in on time.
Only thing about that is they may be setting themselves up to address the issue, because if they say that, then a lot of parents may say, okay, principals say they can address this issue, so y'all go to school and let them address this issue. And that's going to put a lot on those principals trying to find uniforms for a whole bunch of kids that may not need help.
But we keep saying a grace period.
The issue, what do they mean when they say address the issue? They can find clothes and stuff for these kids who come to school not having uniforms.
Yes, ma'am. And I'm going to use the words of Mr. Himes. He says every year they have students who have these issues, and he said they take care of it every year, and they are fully aware that this year they may have double the amount of kids or even more. But he was kind of the loudest voice in the sense that these issues have always been there, according to him, always at Lakeview or whatever school he's been at, and he feels that they can address it and take care of kids. And they also said they want the public to know that they want to take care of this for the kids. They don't want kids to feel ostracized or left out or not taken care of. They feel as though this is their responsibility. They're the instructional leader at schools, but they also feel their first priority is to make sure kids are safe and feel comfortable in their school. And I think that's Maslow's hierarchy. And they said that, that's part of their duty is to make sure kids are dressed properly, and not just from a dress code standpoint, pointing out what they're not wearing, but pointing out that, hey, I need to maybe wash some clothes for a kid, or I need to buy some clothes for a kid, or do whatever is needed.
Okay. Also, I have a question about the CARES Act money. Is that a way to help kids who need money? For clothing?
You have to direct it to a COVID-related situation, and although I'm sure there could be arguments made that is, there's more specificity to what a COVID-related issue is. For instance, getting one-to-one with devices, things of that nature. So that probably would not be something that they would allow. Now, that being said, there are other federal dollars that do allow for the purchase of uniforms from Ms. Wright's department, whereas the CARES Act money is more for bigger ticket issues that are directly related to COVID.
Okay, so when they say address the needs, the principals are saying that they are willing to, I'm willing to purchase clothing for students in need without reimbursements.
There are funds at a school level, and then I would venture to guess that we all know educators who go into their own pocket at times, but I don't think this is the case. They're talking about school funds that are traditionally available for some of these expenditures, and they all feel comfortable that based on their previous situations and years past, some of them are talking about 20 some odd years of experience where they've had this every year, some years greater than others, that they could address this. And,
So they
and
have-
donations from organizations.
And the need might be less since you'll have quite a few kids that'll be doing virtual.
Yeah, I do think we need to realize that a third of the district, we are anticipating a third of the district is going to be participating in virtual. So for them, that it's probably not as big of an issue. But a lot of this is, we can't tell the future either. How long COVID's going to be here and things of that nature.
No.
I got this to say, if they can't afford to buy a uniform, how they gonna be able to afford to buy jeans or a spirit shirt? And we was talking about a grace period. Well, if we're not starting school till the 1st of September, and then give them 2 weeks grace period, they got that's 6 weeks. They get from actually it's 8 weeks from the day from to buy a uniform. So they got 2 months to buy a uniform if they know we're going to start 1st of September. So I can't see changing the uniform because they say we can't buy a uniform, but we can go out and buy a pair of jeans or buy a pair of shirts. Uniforms is a whole lot cheaper than jeans, just a regular shirt.
The whole point of it was not to go out and buy a new wardrobe, but more or less to wear what you already have. Yes. And I know in my situation, I can afford to buy uniforms for my kids, but it's the fact of, and I'm not speaking for myself, but it's just the fact that anywhere you order from right now, it's 3 weeks delay pretty much on everything. That's uniforms and all. And so this whole discussion was not centered around go buy you a new set of play clothes. It's wear what you have in your closet to take the pressure off of parents who may or may not have been working during COVID-19.
Right. This is really just about, again, we keep talking about the extension of grace, and that's really what this is centered around. We had people who were coming to us, they had concerns about going, say, to Shreveport and shopping in an area where there's a high COVID rate. We had people who had concerns about not being able to try things on, about trying to order things and there being delays. It really is, it was just a discussion of how can we best extend grace to all of those in our district.
Okay, Ms. Broadway, what would this motion look like to modify this school uniform or suspend the school uniform policy that we have in place? What would that look like?
Well, I can speak for myself, kind of after listening to everyone. And I think this has been a really great discussion to hear from everyone, not only within the boardroom, but also, like I said, hearing from the community. I would like to possibly propose that we extend our grace period for purchasing the uniforms. I did hear from Mr. Matwire. He mentioned, if we're pushing that school start date back, then there's already an extension built in. So maybe we could extend it, say, to September 15th. I'm not even sure what day on the calendar that is right now. But just something that allows people to take a deep breath, kind of reassess where they are and how best to purchase the clothing items that they need for their child.
Okay, so if we look at the first day being whatever the 31st, so the 14th would be the second Monday, and that would be the 2 weeks.
The second Monday?
Yeah, that would be the 2 weeks.
Because our policy already says that whatever day we start on, they have to give them 2 weeks to get their uniform in. So even if you wanted to go to, I'm not around a calendar, if you wanted to just extend it out to the last day of September, give them a month this year since what's going on. Just give them a month. Let's just extend it out whatever the last day of September for them to have their uniform. Give them an extra 2 weeks. Say 2 weeks, let's give them a month. And I think that would help out, that way too. So they would actually have almost 3 months to get their uniform and stuff.
The only thing I'd say to that, Mr. Matwire, I agree, because if we're already at 2 weeks, but if we move the school year back to starting on August 31st, it's really what we're saying is we're giving, and I hope y'all agree with the logic.
Because we're supposed to start on the 7th, so you would be given, like I said earlier, you got 6 weeks. To get
Exactly. Even if we stick with the September 14th.
well, that whichever way.
So you're looking at, what are we're today on the 14th. 14th of August would be that'd be 4 weeks. 14th of September would be 8 weeks. So you're looking at 8 weeks from today. And if you run it one more week, the 21st, that'd be 9 full weeks. That's over 2 months. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good bit of time.
And that would give, with the 14th, that would be given a Monday. So that would be better to start on a Monday than, in the middle of the week or something like that on it.
So, Ms. Broadway, we talked a little bit about that. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's 2 other people who proposed on here with me, and I'm speaking, and saying I'm open to looking at a grace period through the 14th. How do what other board members feel, and how do the 2 other individuals who proposed the grace period feel about doing it for 2 weeks into September?
I'm totally fine with that. I feel like any effort we make on our part to make the parents less stressed at this point would be appreciated based on the feedback that we've gotten. And I know we're not the only board members who've gotten that feedback, but I would be in agreement to extending it to September 14th. Of course, with the understanding this does not mean go out and buy new play clothes. It means wear what you have that's appropriate and not extremist political views.
Do people still buy play clothes?
They weren't for the activities.
And the thing I would like to say, if we extend it out to the 14th, and even if a child come to school on the 14th without uniform and can't, let's not put them out. Let's the principal say they can address it.
That's right.
And let's address it, or even if the week before, go to this kid if they still don't have uniform, or contact the parent and ask them what the situation. Don't let that child come to school on the 14th and then we calling the parents to send them home.
No, you're
not
right.
putting.
And if that's the case, on the 11th, September 11th and September 10th, we need to be having those conversations with that student. Ms. Palmer, your thoughts?
I agree with the grace period.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, now, are we actually doing anything different than what we normally do, Mr. Matuire, with a 2-week grace period?
Okay, so may I speak, or is Mr. Matuire, are you fixing to speak?
He's muted.
Okay, I'll wait till Mr. Matuire
Still.
has a moment.
Go ahead. I didn't hear what the last thing you said.
I just asked, are we doing anything different than we normally do with a 2-week grace period?
No, not if we wouldn't have to vote on nothing if we still, because there's already a policy with 2 weeks grace period. If we starting on the 30th, and then that would still be given, would that be 2 weeks? We'd be given 2 weeks grace period.
It would be, but you also mentioned.
I don't have a problem on us voting on it tonight to go till in case if we do start earlier. Let's just vote give them the grace period till the 14th.
Let's do it. That sounds good. Ms. Phelps, you had something?
Well, I was just saying, if that's the case, then maybe we should consider September 30th. Because we're really not voting to change anything if we already have that 2-week grace period in, and that's pretty much what September 14th would be, correct?
Yeah. But we also we're pushing school back about 3 to 4 weeks as opposed to our normal start time. So we're adding that.
But right, it wouldn't be a vote then if it's already.
Yeah. So
But I think too, what we're doing is we're making the assumption that we are automatically starting on August 31st. That is nothing that has been voted on yet.
No, that's correct.
We may want to go ahead and set a firm date for either the 14th or the 31st, regardless of start date. That way, whatever happens next week, we can feel confident that we have given these families a significant grace period.
Okay. So are you making a motion? I'm sorry, Reverend Harris, go ahead.
Yeah, I concur with Miss Beverly.
I do too.
So is your motion?
No matter what day we're starting, let's give the grace period to September 14th.
Okay, so you're saying 2 weeks, we're gonna stay 2 weeks after the start of school, whatever that start date is?
No, we're not saying 2 weeks after the start date. We're setting a firm date of September 14th or September 30th, because that is something that Ms. Phelps also brought up. So we're going to set a firm date that that will be the date, regardless of when our actual school start date is, because we haven't voted on whether we're going to move our start date yet.
Okay.
So we're just setting a firm date instead of saying 2 weeks. We're stating September 14th or September 30th.
Just make a motion on whatever day y'all want and let's vote.
Okay, but I wanted to, so Ms. Phelps and Ms. Palmer, how did we feel about 14th versus the 30th?
I will go with the 30th. 30th.
Okay. All right, well then I will make a motion that we extend the uniform grace period through September 30th, regardless of when school starts for the 2020-2021 school year.
I'll second it.
Ms. Broadway, only this year?
Yes, that's what the agenda item states.
Okay, so we have a offer by Mrs. Broadway, a second by Reverend Harris to extend the grace period for the uniforms. For the,
ask a clarifying
sure.
question?
Just clarification from I guess anyone on the board. When we discuss this grace period, we would still require students to wear uniforms if able, and then as we address individual issues, as soon as we address those, they would wear their uniforms as able. Correct? Is that how I'm interpreting? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it's not
and the appropriate attire.
Yeah. So it's not free reign until September 30th. It's as needed the grace.
Right. And again, we have guidelines for students during dress down days. And so those guidelines can apply during this grace period for those students who do not have the appropriate uniform.
Okay, that's all I needed to ask.
Can you frame that motion again for Ms. Revels?
Yes. So I am moving that we extend the grace period for the uniform policy until September 30th for the 2020-2021 school year.
To a specific date? September 30th,
September
right?
30th, yes.
Right. And with the caveat that if you have uniforms, you wear them. This is just for the situations where you don't have uniforms.
Correct.
Okay.
This is very similar to the grace period Mr. McGuire has reminded us of. Okay. And we're just extending it because of these extenuating circumstances.
Okay. We have a motion by Mrs. Broadway, a second by Reverend Harris. Any further discussion on this item?
No.
Mrs. Revels, roll call vote, please, ma'am.
Okay, I'm sorry. You said Ms. Broadway and Mr. Harris?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I have one question. I think you guys covered it. I got distracted. I'm sorry. For the students who do not have uniforms, is there a dress code?
I would propose that it would be the guidelines that are in place for our dress down days at school, because I think most schools do have those guidelines in place.
Okay. Okay. And we are on executive report number 6. All right. Mr. Danzy.
Yes.
Mr. Garner.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Matoir,
Yes.
Mrs. Guidros, Mrs. Willis,
Yes.
Mr. Benefiel,
Yes.
Mrs. Broadway,
Yes.
Mrs. McGaskey,
Yes.
Ms. Palmer,
Yes.
and Ms. Phelps.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay. Thank you for that discussion. Item 7, discuss LP Bond preschool playground. We started with that discussion, Mrs. Palmer, on last Tuesday's meeting. And any further discussion on that from your part?
Only thing I was just gonna get to see, I was gonna ask Mr. Eloy when he's able to meet, so we can go and view it and see what needs to be done, so we can just get started on something.
Yes, ma'am. Are you available this Friday?
No, not
Are you-
this Friday.
Okay. Are you available Thursday?
Yes, around maybe 11.
I think that would be perfect. So I will get Ms. Revels to send us both an invite and Mr. Cody, and we will make that happen and start seeing what we can do for the kids at LP Vaughn so they have a nice playground.
Okay.
Right. Okay, and so we'll carry this discussion until next month. Item 8, discuss construction of the new parking lot on Parkway Drive, and Mr. Foshee has some wonderful news for us.
Yeah, we've actually had to stop the construction of the new part of the parking lot. We received a letter from an attorney representing that neighborhood, basically saying that there was a underlying clause where when that land was purchased by Coca-Cola Bottling, who we purchased it from, that there could only be a residential structure constructed on the property and not a parking lot or anything business related. Now, we received approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission to go ahead with our plans for the parking lot, and then also they gave us our building permit. But evidently this was somehow buried in the fine details. And right now, so we've held up, we've got our attorney working with them and just trying to decide what to do. But right now we've had to hold up on the work. And I don't think have we gotten any updates from the attorney, Mr. Eloy?
Our board attorney, when this initially happened, he's indisposed right now, so we have another lawyer with the firm dealing with it, and he has communicated with the gentleman, the attorney and the gentleman who initially issued this to us, and so he's in the midst of dealing with all that, but we have not heard back since, I believe, last Thursday when they sent a letter to the other party stating that we had received and were stopping construction until we had more time to delve into the issue.
Any questions for Mr. Foshee? This is something that we had in the works, and we had thought that there was clear sailing.
Yeah.
Everything, from our purpose, was pushed forth through the governmental agencies, planning commission. Everything was on go until we received this letter in the mail, which is essentially to stop construction. So we'll hopefully be able to resolve this issue. I understand that the subdivision doesn't necessarily want a parking lot, but I think it's in the best interest of the entire parish for us to be able to put this small parking lot there. And so perhaps we can work something out. Any questions from any board member?
Where are you gonna get the money from?
Well, that's from a general fund. That's where the money would come from, which we're over
I
budget.
thought we don't have any money though.
So that money didn't come from the bond?
No, we can't.
That wasn't including in the bond?
No, we can't use the bond money for that.
If you remember, our friends at Tractor Supply asked us to stop parking in their parking lot. And so we have a tremendous amount of buses, and we have to find somewhere to put them.
Yeah, and this is for the actually for the parking for the vehicles, the cars.
Yeah.
For the bus drivers.
Okay.
But but we already in it. Like, where are we gonna get the money from? Y'all keep saying we don't have any money, but we're getting money to do these other jobs. these other projects, but we don't have any money.
Well, we've already gotten some work done where we repaired part of the existing lot there, so we'll have to pay for that too.
Okay, so was it indicated, Mr. Foshi, that someone indicated that the money would come from the general fund for the parking lot to finish it?
Yeah, we discussed that previously.
Yeah, I just wanted to get clarification on it.
But yeah, it would come from general fund because we can't use the bond money for it.
And Mr. Foshi, when was this originally, do you know how long ago this was agreed upon as far as the construction of the parking lot?
I want to say it was like January or so of this year, or maybe even earlier than that. We could go back and look in the board minutes and see.
So where is this parking lot? By the bus depot?
Yes,
Okay, so the problem is you don't have enough money. What's the problem?
There's some of the neighbors in the area don't want a parking lot constructed, and they found a clause where when the land was purchased years ago that it stated that it would be used for residential only.
There's a covenant in the subdivision that was discovered from the 60s, Ms. Palmer, that does not allow for a parking lot. And so this covenant is blocking us now. And so I'm not sure when.
But you've already started work on the parking lot in that area where you're not supposed to be making a parking lot?
Yeah, we've started, and then we've also started where we have a parking lot. We've had to do some repair work. Now they've completed that repair work on the existing parking lot.
Okay, so the parking area, the space where it doesn't supposed to be commercial but only residential, what is in that space right now?
Well, right now it's just dirt.
Okay, so you can't do anything right there because it's only supposed to be for residential.
Right.
Okay, so now you're trying to find another area to build another parking lot.
No. We're just bringing this to the board's attention that they've asked us to cease the construction on the new parking lot. And there's really no other area in that over there. That's the only spot we have to add parking.
And we've issued it to the board attorney to see if everything that we're being told from the other party is in fact the case, and doing our due diligence in that regard.
Okay, so this money. Okay, so all right.
The money is there supposedly.
Okay, all right. The money isn't an issue. Okay. Oh, okay.
And so we'll wait until Mr. Foshi has some additional information on our parking lot here. Perhaps maybe we can even talk about a privacy fence or something to satisfy the neighbors. Who knows?
Yeah, we were going to do a fence too.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to ask. Do y'all have any ideas? Have y'all thought about any ideas on what to do if it comes back and say, well, no, you cannot make a parking lot right there?
Well, there's a lot of privacy fences in that neighborhood. So if we build one that's tall enough, I don't see where. But again, that's their covenant, and they're closely guarding evidently the rights of the covenant.
Yeah.
So is that by the nutrition office also?
Yes.
So it was okay to build right there.
It's specific to one lot, and that's lot 4, correct?
I think it's lot 4. Yeah.
All the other lots
closer towards the houses.
Yes.
So we're unable to vote on anything tonight until we get a response from our legal from our attorney.
Right.
Just discussion.
Yeah, just discussion.
He's just informing us where we are in the process and why it was stopped.
Okay.
Well, I'm very grateful they brought that to our attention because it sounds like we followed all the right protocols. And with it being approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission, you would have had no other indication that it was wrong. So I'm grateful that they brought that to our attention before we got too far in, if we were going to have to stop. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, and Ms. Phelps is absolutely right. So at that point later on, it would be a contentious situation. Right now, it's still a discussion.
Right. So we can remedy, hopefully, whatever we need to do on our end to keep the neighbors happy and make sure it's zoned properly, which doesn't sound like it is. So.
Any more questions for Mr. Foshee?
I have a question on an unrelated matter, and if you want to wait till the end of the meeting, that's fine. But I had some technical difficulties early on, and I was unable to ask the question under old business. But I wanted to know if Mr. Foshee has provided a list of our capital assets to the auditor from the deficiency to the audit that we had.
No, we have not done that yet.
Okay. Do you know when we might?
No, I do not. They actually are. I've given that to our CPA, the list of the assets, but they haven't come back and told us, what the value is. That's the issue with the auditor, is the value of those assets.
Yeah, so we definitely need to get that done so we can add it to our website under transparency, because the public does need to know this as well. Okay. And ever since I've been on the board, that's been something that I've been asking for, is a list of our capital assets, which with a value. So the board needs it as well, for sure.
Also, to add to that, like, is there a document, or I don't know if you have given us this in the past, Mr. Foshee, something that shows us like which schools got the BRE money and like how much?
There's not really a document like you're talking about for the city schools.
Right.
No, they share, the schools share the BRE money for the inner city areas.
All the schools, like you said, Montevideo, they got a $400,000 parking lot. So I'm just trying to figure out like how much money do they have, to work with to get things done.
Yeah, they have quite a bit more. They probably take in close to $1 million a year. Yeah, on their taxes. Yeah.
So is there something we can see that shows like how much each school has like in BRE money?
Yeah, there's a report we can pull.
Yes. It should be fairly up to date, Ms. Palmer. Consolidated 9, all the city schools, they share the budget.
They share, yeah.
What's up to date?
Your BRE balances.
Yeah.
I want to know if it's something I can see on paper.
Yeah, we can run a report.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Foshee.
Another question in regard.
Facebook, and I don't think.
No.
I'm sorry. I'm listening.
Wait, before you do that, Reverend Harris, and I know what you're thinking, I would like to take this time to thank all of the members of the staff and everyone that contributes to making this system successful, because this has been very trying times. I know our board members are very concerned about what we can do to help. Thank you all for what you do, the late hours you put in, the Saturdays, the Sundays, the constant calls, the questions and things like that. I just want to thank everyone in our system for making our children's education the best we possibly can, and for us to be successful.
Yes, absolutely.
Reverend Harris, you had something to say?
Wait, wasn't Ms. McGaskey trying to say something just a second ago?
Yes, I was trying to inquire about the tax check. I got a question about that from a couple of people. That the teachers normally get. Will it be received, do you know, Mr. Foshee, by the end of July or later?
No, they've been received. They've gone out.
They've already gotten them. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I just had been asked, and I wanted to make sure. And what was the deduction because of the issue with us getting too much money from the?
It was around $130 approximately.
130.
Yeah, 130 per check.
I have a question, Mr. Poshi, about the tax checks. Okay, if you work 20 years, if you have teachers that have worked 20 years, will all teachers that work 20 years get the same amount of money?
No.
Why is it different for each teacher?
I'm not sure.
Because of the education, it all depends on if you got a 20-year after the.
No, let's say that it's a teacher with 20 years and she just got a bachelor's. And her license. And you got two. Well, all the teachers with a bachelor's and their license from the state to teach, will they all get the same amount of tax money?
If they got the same education.
It should be.
Mr. Foshi. Mr. Foshi, will you answer the question?
Yeah, it should be. We'd have to look at each one on an individual basis. So if you have names, call us and give us the names, and we can look at them and check them and see if there's.
But you're saying that's how it's supposed to be. If you have the same amount of education, same amount of years, you're supposed to get the same amount of money.
Right.
And each principal, does that work the same with like principals, or no? They what?
Ms. Palmer, but there are some underlying things such as what your deductions, what your pullouts are, and so that may lower that rate a little bit. And so it's not the gross should be fairly close, but once they start pulling out, the net will be different for sure.
It's gonna be different depending on your degree too. Anyway.
Who did we lose? Ms. McGaskey still with us?
Still here.
All right, good deal.
Y'all finna lose.
We've been working at you all meeting.
Oh, yes, I had some difficulties.
I do not mean to be a pest, but not for Mr. Foshi, but I have two other items before we close out.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, again, I had technical difficulties during the time we discussed the calendar, potentially for moving that date back. And one of the things I noticed that teachers will still report for PD on August 3rd to August 5th.
That's incorrect. And I apologize. I think that should have been changed to teachers are on we cannot make them report only, I think, about 176.5 days is what their contracts are. So that should have been 3 days prior to that August 31st, which would have been a 28th. Now, we would have more professional development in that time period, but some of that would be optional, and some of it would be necessary. And if it's necessary, we do have funds in order to give stipends and things of that nature, as we spoke about earlier today.
Okay, so right.
I'm sorry, you cut out. I'm sorry.
That would get corrected if we move further
Yes,
along.
that's not the calendar that I sent to y'all was only for y'all's viewing because that was really just part of my superintendent's report. We haven't put that even out to the public yet. That's just for y'all's consumption. So before we put anything out to the public, it would go through more revisions and make sure all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
And then I received a text from a parent who wanted clarification on the deadline for virtual if we move that date back for
Okay,
school.
so
You could,
if we do not move school back, then I believe the date stands. If we were to move the start date of school back, then we would probably look at July 22nd is when the governor's supposed to come out again. And I would look at two things. I would look at he's coming out at that time to possibly keep us in phase 2 or move us to phase 3. But then I'd also want to look at depending on what he does, say he keeps us in phase 2, but he says, I'm going to come back in a week and possibly move us into phase 3. Then I think we could go to that extra week, but it really depends on what he would tell us the next time he speaks to us about what phase and when he's going to update that phase. Does that make sense?
Totally does. So the deadline, is it this Friday for the virtual, if it stands the way it is?
Correct. And what we could do is we could take it down Friday, and then based on our next meeting, we could either freeze it and then make it live again if the board goes with a later start date, or we could do some different things. I'd have to get with technology, Mr. Kozad and Ms. Paris, and figure out exactly how we facilitate that, but we'd make it work.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry to be so wordy.
No, not at all. That's your job.
Mr. Eloy, one quick question. Remember whenever you set this next special call meeting next week, Reverend Harris and myself have meetings obligated Monday night, Tuesday night, and Thursday night at 6 o'clock.
Okay. Yes, sir. And we will be at those meetings. I've actually, I think it needs to be, we've actually talked about Monday week as a possibility, because I think, Ms. Broadway, you also have some issues with a meeting next week. And we would want, because this is a big issue, we would want obviously as many people to be in attendance as possible. So we would work around as many schedules as possible.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that, Mr. Garner. One other thing, just remember our training on the 17th has been canceled and postponed, not canceled, postponed. So we don't want anyone driving to the destination and looking for the rest of the board members. So let's make sure we get all that information out. Reverend Harris, did you have a motion to adjourn?
Okay, since everybody else got a chance to do it, I need to do it. I'm really sorry. While I have everybody here, I sent out an email today, but just to make sure, I need to know who wants me to sign them up for that virtual conference. I've only heard from 2 board members. You don't have to give me an answer tonight, although it would be great, but I need to know something by noon Thursday.
I sent a response to that. You didn't receive it?
No, ma'am, I didn't. Would you like for me to sign you up for this conference?
Yes, please, ma'am.
Gotcha.
Is that Friday, on a Friday?
And Friday and Saturday. Friday afternoon and Saturday morning. I think
yes.
That's correct.
Yes.
Is there anything else
to know tonight? Sign you up, Ms. Palmer?
Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha. And again, for anyone who is not sure tonight, that's fine. Just please let me know something by Thursday noon.
Can I ask a question before we adjourn? Because I was having technical difficulties, I missed the part about the transportation report. Didn't we have 2 gentlemen there from ECHO?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, did we, because I think I missed a vote or 2. Did we cast a vote on that tonight? Whether
no, it was just an update.
Okay.
And they just told us that they're looking at still filling the terminal manager position. They're getting very close. They're getting in the final stages of that. And they were very happy to be here and enjoy Louisiana heat. And that's really all they had.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. God, we really had to struggle with technically something was going on today. I don't know if it was just too hot from the internet or what, but I appreciate y'all hanging in with us. Do I hear a motion to adjourn, Mr. Guidros?
Yes.
Have a motion, Ms. Guidros, to adjourn. Do I have a second, Mr. McTwire?
Second.
All right, we're adjourned.